A very warm welcome to all of you to the Scottish Summit 2021. My name is Wriju, and I'm gonna walk you through some of the exciting web developers' journey to cloud context. But before that, I would like to really thank our sponsors. ScriptRunner, the number one PowerShell management, DQ Global, driving your data quality, Proximo 3 is a Microsoft consulting specialist, RedSphere, Agilicis, and Hitachi Solutions. Now, I work for Microsoft as a cloud solution architect, and as part of my day-to-day job, I help enterprises move their workload into cloud. And one of the things and the trend I'm seeing today is to containerize the application and moving into the cloud because enterprises look for multi-container strategy. And that's the ideal approach towards multi-container strategy to containerize your application because the platform container works exactly as is in different cloud vendors. And let's spend some time talking about the tools for the thread, right? So I will be using Visual Studio Code for remote development because I have everything set up in a remote Linux machine, and that remote Linux machine can be your WSL, that's Windows Subsystem for Linux, or a Linux virtual machine in your hypervisor, local hypervisor, or a Linux virtual machine in your cloud. And then we will talk about few important extensions which I'm using for this demo. And I'll show you how I can containerize the ASP.NET application and then package it for the deployment. And then how can I push it to the container registry, running it in the container, right? I'll use the Azure container instances. You can run it in any container if you want. And then I'll show you how you can deploy it in Kubernetes, and then you can choose any Kubernetes in any cloud or local. So depending on how your Kubernetes looks like, because Kubernetes is uniform across, you do not have different experience doing that. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to switch to the first screen, which is um, the Ubuntu machine which I'm using. So I'm using Ubuntu, Linux Ubuntu 18.04 LTS, and it's in my Azure subscription. So you can see that this is the subscription. This is the IP address I can access it. Now, if I go ahead and then try to open the Cloud Shell in the browser, just to give you the experience that you can pretty much do remote in from this browser itself. So I'll say SSH, and then I'll pass on the username and the host IP address. And then it will ask me to provide the password. So let me provide the password. And this will go ahead and show me the thing. So if I say ls, and you will see that all the local folders are visible to you. So they basically are inside this machine. So you can pretty much see that I basically have got few things which I might need to use. What I want to also do is that I want to create a folder where I'll be working on. So I'll say mkdirss21, that's the folder. And if I just cd into that ss21, right? So that basically is an empty folder. Now, because I'm going to build an ASP web application, so let's build an ASP.NET application. So to build an ASP.NET application, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to use the .NET CLI. In this machine, I have got all the runtimes and everything installed. So just to show you that I have Docker installed, so you can see the Docker CLI coming. I've got .NET Core installed, right? It's a Linux machine, so I have got things, all of them installed. So let me create a new ASP.NET application inside this folder. So to do that, I'll use .NET new MVC, and I give a name, SS Web. That's a name I'm gonna call it out, and then I want to specify a switch just to avoid some fixing thing. HTTPS, just for the demo purpose. Otherwise, in production, you should always be considering the with HTTPS, which is the default option for obvious reason. And it goes ahead and starts creating that. Now I can just check whether I can go inside this folder, because it now will create a folder. And then I go to SS Web, and then I say .NET run. And this will run the build process, and then it will show me the mapped URL, which will not work here because I'm not connected to a local host. So, but anyways, just to ensure that the build is successful, I wanted to make sure that, yeah, it is working fine. So I can say Control C and it goes off. So I'm fine at this point in time. Now this time, remember that you are the public IP address for this virtual machine. So it ends with 144. That's 3144. You don't need to remember the full thing, but just remember that. And then I open the Visual Studio Code. I can see that it is showing something at the bottom of the screen saying that this is connected to this SSH. Now, I talked about few extensions at the beginning, right? You need few extensions because the Visual Studio Code is a bare metal thing. It comes with only few extensions, and then people are building this extension. So there are extensions available for many different um, individuals, companies, etc. So they have rich set of extensions. This is one of the most popular tools freely available for all the developers. So you should ideally be leveraging if you are not, and I'm sure all of you are leveraging that. So I have connected this to remote SSH, right? Now, what happens when you connect it to the remote SSH? You should be able to browse the local file. But before that, what I'm going to do quickly is that I'm going to show you various different extensions I'm using. So this is the marketplace. So you can see that there are hundreds of extensions available, right? It's really difficult for you to really choose what you want. But what I'm using, only few I wanted to highlight, is that C Sharp, because I'm using .NET Core. So I am writing C Sharp application. So I need this for build activity. And then I need a Docker extension, right? Which basically helps me to build the Docker file, which is basically nothing but setup build instructions. And then I have got my remote SSH. Remote SSH is this shows the remote WSL, but I am using remote SSH. Remote SSH is to really connect to your any Linux box anywhere which you have access to, and you can do SSH from the machine, local machine. So ideally, my Visual Studio is not in the development box, which is the Ubuntu, because Ubuntu is a headless Ubuntu server which doesn't have a graphical user interface, so I cannot run my Visual Studio Code in that Ubuntu. However, I can run the Visual Studio Code in Ubuntu desktop. That's possible, but I'm using server. But what I'm doing is that I'm using my local Visual Studio Code. This is my local Visual Studio Code running on top of Windows 10. And that is where I'm gonna basically use this capability of remoting into that Linux box and then start working on it. So I need components like .NET Core. I also do development using Python, Node.js, Go. So all of them are installed in that dev box. And in fact, there's a script I always run that whenever there's a new machine, just to go step by step and install all the runtimes. Pretty easy. And then also have a Docker up and running over there. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to open the local folder from this. So if you say open folder from the Visual Studio, you can see that it is now browsing the Linux machine, which is the machine which I'm connected to, that is 3144, right? So if I go into that down, I see SS21. That's the folder I created. I also got SSWeb created by .NET Core. And then if I run this, yeah, okay, it's going to go ahead and show me the folder. And you can see that it's now prompting me to enter the password just for the safety and security purpose. So let me go ahead and enter. You need to make sure that you are typing the right password. If you're using SSH key, things become easier. So you don't have to always type the password. So now it shows me all the files and folders within that SSWeb directory, which got created by the .NET Core, right? So you can pretty much see all of them over here. Now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to experience that running process in this machine. So to do that, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to run the .NET run. I can also go into this menu and run, but I prefer to use the CLI because that remains same everywhere you go. So I'll say .NET run. Um, you are okay. So .NET build. So there is an extension missing. So let me see. So let me just try running that. Okay, run without debugging, maybe. Choose Chrome. And that's okay. I will just start running. This ran fine for me in the, let me just quickly check what exactly changed over here. So let me just go ahead and say .NET run. This exactly is running so that there should not be any issue at this point in time over here. Let me try running that and from my Visual Studio again. So let me go to terminal, new terminal, and then I just clean all the terminal just to make sure that they are not colliding with each other. So .NET run, yeah, that's fine. So it was maybe some historical thing, and it can now um, asking me to open it in browser. So you can see that now my ASP.NET MVC is basically running locally. It's basically HTTP port mapping happening, right? The port 80 is now mapped to my local port 5000, and then it is showing in the local host. So 127.0.1 5000. That's the local port it is using to show up this. So this is the ASP.NET MVC core application, which I got by default from the template. That's all fine. Everything looks okay. Now, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to switch to my Visual Studio Code again, right? And then I show you all the extensions which I have. I'm using in my Visual Studio Code. If you do not have them, you can just come here in the extension. You don't need to go to the portal and search and find them by name. So if you say SSH, you'll find the remote SSH over here. That's what I'm using. If you need the C sharp, if you just type the C sharp, you have that C sharp. So let me say install the C sharp. So I install the C sharp component over there. It basically says Docker, and you have the Docker installed. So all of them are installed. That's why there is no button for me to install, right? So they are kind of done. Now what I need to do is that now this is an application which is not Dockerized, or I should say that this is kind of um, not yet uh, ready for container. Now let us make it ready. Now we can use some of the components from the Visual Studio Code to do that. Now let me show you that experience. So what I can do is that I can use this Control Shift P that invokes the extension command, and I say Docker. And you can see that add a Docker file to the workspace. And if you do that, it will immediately ask me to run the .NET task. Now, we have one file missing at this point in time, and I'm going to add that file first before I run this. So I'll say task, and that will say run build task. If I run build task, right, what happens? The it won't find anything, and it will say, yeah, just go ahead and select a task and then create a task.json. And then when you create the task.json, you choose the .NET Core as your typical build task. So that's what it's gonna go ahead and add to my folder. You can see that it shows up in the task.json under .vs code folder, and that's what I need for my machine. Now I just save it, and then I invoke that extension on command again, command palette again, and then I say Docker. And to do that, I say add Docker files to workspace. The Docker file is set of instructions. So I'll choose what application, kind of application, that is ASP.NET Core, and which will be the container, that's a Linux container. And then I do not have that 443 in my container. So let's not use it. Do you need a Docker compose file? I say no, because I have only one container, and it's gonna go ahead and add few files. So you can notice here, it added some file called Docker file. The process is not yet complete. You can see at the bottom, but once the process is complete, you can open that file. This file is basically the file which you need to basically build that container for yourself. Now, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to not only build this container, but also push it to a public registry. You can either choose Docker Hub or Azure Container Registry or your private registry, anything you prefer to. So let us use, let's say, the Docker Hub. Okay, so let me open that in my machine, and then you can see that I am right now in the hub.docker.com, and I just logged in, and then I created a repository. Right now there is nothing, and you can see that there is no container available. If I go inside that, there is nothing. So I'll use this. So you can, anybody can go here and create it. It's free. So I can just go ahead and then copy this URI, and then that's the repository name. And then I come over here in my local machine, and then use my terminal to kickstart the Docker build process. Now, you know that Docker comes with a CLI. So that's the CLI. And I use this CLI called Docker build. So let me just clean it up, and let me increase the size here. So I'll say Docker build. If I do that, now I can just say dot, and that is more than sufficient. But I want to also tag this image so that I can push it later. So let's do it now. So you can say -t and the repository name. If you don't specify the fully qualified URL, it'll assume that you are putting it in the Docker Hub, because Docker is by Docker Hub. So you say SS21. That's the Docker Hub URL. And then you tag it. So I would like to tag it as V1. That's a version 1 of my image. And then I say dot. That means the Docker file is in this folder. So you are in the SS web folder, and then the Docker file is in this folder, and then it will kickstart the the application building process. Now you can see that this basically will download few layers and then package them, run the tasks, right? And once everything is fine, there is no warning, no error. So there'll be 16 tasks, and then an image will be available for you in your local machine. Just to test, what is that image? You can say Docker images, and you'll find few. You'll find this one, right? I just have a V1, right? And then you have got few other things. So if you want to really rename it to, let's say, V2, you can also go ahead and do that. So if you say that I want to go ahead and say I want to do a V2 version, and then it says that V2 version is created, and I go to say Docker images, you get a V2. Okay. So basically, that image is what you will be using for the ultimate deployment, because now your code is kind of packaged. They are ready to be deployed. Now let's use this Docker image to push it to the registry I'm using. So to do that, I need a Docker login. I need to first log in to the Docker Hub, and I just need to provide the username, okay, and the password. And it says login successful. That means I have entered the right username and password. When you say Docker login with an URL, so you see the Docker login, and if you say help, it basically also let you provide the server details. So if you have your own, let's say, registry, you will provide that URL, right? You can also pass along the password as a clear text and the username as a clear text, and then make it part of your uh, build pipeline. So you can do all those things. So Docker CLI is really powerful in that sense. It allows you to not to have a user prompt, but automate the whole thing. So you can do all of them. Now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to push this image. So I kind of logged into this, and I basically have the image available. So you say Docker images. You see that image available, right? With a V2, and then I want to push it. So I'll say Docker push. The moment I say Docker push and then provide the image repository, right? That's this one SS21, and also say V2, it's gonna go ahead and take my image, right? And then push it to Docker Hub. Now, I just would like to show you the experience over here. You just refresh this, and the Docker Hub right now doesn't have any tags or scans or anything at this point in time. All fine, right? I go back and I enter. It's gonna go ahead and push all the necessary images and the layers, etc., into the Docker Hub. So for the first time, it'll do everything. So it's basically gonna go ahead and do that. Next time onwards, if you make any changes, it'll only pick up the delta and then push it the delta. That's the beauty of it. That's why Docker is so efficient, right? And you can see that now if I come over here and refresh this, ideally I should be able to see an image available which is with a tag v2, right? You can see that the v2 came here a few seconds ago, and that's a Linux operating system, right? And then architecture is AMD 64. That's the basically the root container which it used. Now, what is the root container? If you notice in the Docker file, I just now open that, you find that it basically says mcr-microsoft.com as .NET ASP.NET 5.0. This is the base image for all the .NET Core application. If you want to Dockerize, has got all the runtimes you need to run your .NET Core. And then it also brings in the .NET SDK image and then package them together. And then you can see that my csproj folder files getting copied, and then it is running the .NET Restore, .NET Build, .NET Publish, and then from the published folder, it basically copies all the extracted versions. So it is not packaging my source code. It is only packaging my executables, right? Thing I need to run my application. So definitely you are not losing out all your intellectual things if you want to protect that way. So that's what it is now available. So all fine, right? I have got my Docker. Now, before that, I would like to also test whether my application really runs in the Docker kind of context. Remember that I have my local machine, which has got Docker installed, Docker CE installed, right? So I can go over here, and then I can show you that Docker PS, and then right now there is no container running, right? And then I say, if I say F, will it keep watching? If I say Docker PS help, I just want to run it in a watch mode. Mm, right now it doesn't provide anything like that. So let's you come back over here and run this Docker PS again once I have this application running. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and say run without debugging from my Visual Studio. If I do that, It's gonna go ahead and then show me things in the browser. I actually don't need that. I don't like this file, so let me just delete this. Uh, delete permanently. Okay. I don't want to launch it in the local, so I'll say start. Uh, Again, it is asking me to. So let me just delete this and run without debugging. Run without debugging. It's now building. And you can see that activity happening, right? So this is basically doing some task in my local machine. Okay, so that means if there is some Visual Studio is getting conflicted with some port, which I don't want to fix it at this point in time, but this should ideally run. So let us use some Docker platform to run this in the cloud. So what I have over here, now I will go over here, is that I go to the home resource groups. Now I just wanted to see if that Docker PS got created. Minus A. Okay, so I'll say that Scottish. Yep. And then what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna say add and then Azure container registry, not registry, instances. So this is basically a managed container platform where you can just bring in your um, own image, and then you can say that, hey, I have my this image, I want to run it in container, but I don't want to really manage the whole container platform. So I'll say SS Web 21. Okay, that's the name of the container, and I'll say Docker Hub, and then it's a public, and I'll just provide this Docker Hub URI. So that is SS21. Okay, and this is Linux, and then networking, and I say SS Web 21. Okay, next, and then I say this one is 80. It's fine. Next, create. So this will basically build a container for me pulling down the image from the Docker Hub because it's given, right? If you have any private, you could also provide that. You could use. You have seen that in the wizard, and then you can see that once this deployment is successful, it's gonna go ahead and show your application in the in the repository. So let us see that. It says deployment failed. Okay, so let me just go and check what is the URL I've given. And it showed me that it could not. Did I mistype anything? Yeah, it's fine. Okay, so I have got few container already created. So let me just switch to that without fixing. So I kind of go here and that, and then I say Scottish web, and then I should be having ACI running. So let me close this. Okay, let me just try doing that again. Container instances, and I just create the container instance here. SS 21 A. Okay. If you don't provide a fully qualified name, it assumes that this is the container. I do not have any container. Okay, I made a mistake saying that I did not specify the tag, and it doesn't have any latest tag. So that's why it was not able to provide that. So that should be fine. Now SS web 21. Okay, and I say next, 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 and then I say next. Because I did not specify the v2, it could not find that. So let me say create. So what happens now? It's going to go ahead and then kickstart the container deployment. So the container deployment works like this. So you have got pool of container servers available. Your container goes and sits on one of those servers, and they are highly secure, sandbox. So no one container can talk to another container if you don't own them. So you can run only one container, and it's a very simple solution. It's not meant for a lot of highly available kind of activity, which means that you are basically not going to choose it for large scale deployment or high highly available kind of solution, but it is good for, let's say, putting a short code and calling it as and when required, and then you don't have the headache of maintaining managing that. So if you get a container from your partner company who provides a container and then ask you to really use an URI to call that and then get some typical calculation done, you can use this container instance. So that's what I'm using. So I can basically build that same thing in my local machine as well. So I can also build that. So let's just wait for a few moments while it is getting created. And in the meantime, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to also kickstart Kubernetes platform, which basically where I'm going to start and use this to deploy the container. So what I'm using here is a Karakoda environment. And Karakoda environment is mainly meant for Kubernetes Playground, right? I can also use my AKS, go ahead and create a cluster and then do that. But I'll be ultimately using kubectl. So that's the tool to really do that. So that's enough for me at this point. You can even try that. So it's absolutely free. So you can see that it's running right now in the version number 1.18. So that's almost the current one. So let me also say alias k equals to kubectl so that I can avoid typing. So I'll say get all. So you see only one service is up and running. Let us just quickly check. It says go to resources, and you see that container is up and running. So there's no error at this point in time. If you go inside the containers, right, you will see the individual containers available, and you can see this container. And then if you go into the log, and you'll be able to see the log showing up here, a very little, right? So you can also go the connect option, and then you can connect to the bash window of that container, and you will see everything over there. If you come back into this container URL, I just did not specify that fqdn, which I should have been. Let me just see if I can use this. And I see that this is showing my ASP.NET Core application. All fine, right? Everything looks fine. Great. No problem at this point in time. So I'm kind of good. My container build is successful. I wanted to test this. I wanted to test whether my container which I built really works. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to use this thing in my Karakoda. That's the Kubernetes environment. And I'm going to write one small piece of code. I can use a preloaded YAML, but that will not give you the essence. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to build a pod using that container. So I'll create a deployment. So I'll say create deployment, and then you just say image. And here, this image will be my image. So you just mention and image slash ss21 slash v2. Okay, that's the version 2 of my image. And then I say this as port equals 80. So I expose the port 80 for this, and I should be fine, right? Let me see if I can do that port 80. Port is not supported, so let's just use this, and that should be fine. I need to give a name, so I'll say SS web, and then my deployment is created, and I say get all. You see that my container is getting created, right? There's a container which is getting created. I just wanted to make sure that container is getting rightly created, then only I can see that. So get pods minus watch. It's running. So that's fantastic. So this is running. Now what I can do, I can just create create svc ss web svc, and then instead of creating a service, what I am going to do is that I'm going to expose this to port 80. So that will create a service. So I'll say k expose deployment ss web. That's the name of the deployment, right? And then I say port 80. With the new version of kubectl, port 80 can be passed along with the deployment. But this time, I'm not able to do that because I'm using something old. So get all will get you a service called SS Web, and you can see that this has got a IP address. Now, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to take this IP address, okay, copy this IP address, and I say use something like curl command, and I say HTTP. I'm not using HTTPS, so that's fine. And I say paste, and that uses port 80, and you can see that it basically shows some HTML. And that HTML is coming from my ASP.NET Core. You can see that ASP.NET Core, where is my welcome? This is the home, and this is the welcome message. Okay, that's the main welcome message you can see. Now what I'm going to do is that quickly, I'm going to go ahead and change few things in my code and then show you the experience. So I come over here, I go to the views, and I go to the home, and I go to the index, and I say v3. That's a version 3. And I save this, okay? I run the terminal, and I say docker build -t Wriju Ghosh ss21v3 dot. That's gonna go ahead and then build this image, and it'll create a new image called v3, and the new image will be pushed to the Docker Hub. So once I am done with that, but before that, let me also clean this mess. So I'll say k delete all dash dash all so that I can run again. And then this time it's gonna go ahead and then delete all these things which I did earlier, right? So I will just rerun the whole process, but just watch. And then this docker push, and then push which image? Just to check docker images, you will find this newly created image that is v3, right? So I'll say docker push this and ss21 v3. That's gonna go ahead and push this into, and you can see that already layers existed. So it didn't push anything which was there already, and it added a new thing over there. So if I go into this Docker Hub, and you'll see another version. Now it's v2. I refresh this page, and it should show up the v3, which is basically another thing. So, and you can see that the v3 is now available. So which means I can now use it for my Kubernetes. Now I told you, right, in my thing, right, it is right now running. So you can just see the doc thing here. Let me show you that container. Okay, and then if I just go ahead and then show you the log and then connect. So let me go to the overview. Okay, and I can, let's say, right, so I'll just, okay, then it's clean, right? So I'll say clear. So okay, create. Let me just go ahead and then get the, ah, so okay, create deployment. This time I'll use v3. Okay, and I'll give the same name, that's okay. And then I just use this kexpose port 80, and then I run the same command, that is, let me check what is the URL, kget svc. What is the IP address? This time it should be different. So if I say that curl http 10.106.229.43, and then port 80 is port 80. And you will see that now the welcome v3 has shown up. So the welcome v3 really now reflected because I have now taken a new image, that is a v3, and that new image got pushed from your local machine, from the Visual Studio Code to the Git Docker Hub, and then that Kubernetes, which you are using anywhere in the globe, you can pretty much use the same YAML, and that YAML looks exactly the way you should think from that perspective. So if you say that get deploy ssweb, and then output YAML, and that's a YAML which you can use for um, for your deployment. So you can use something like um, maybe dash export, and that's the right YAML for your actual deployment. You can copy it to a file saying that deploy.yaml, and then you can see that it's deprecated. That's okay. So you can just see that vi deploy.yaml, and that's the YAML file you will be using to deploy your code. Now, I just wanted to show you where it is basically mentioned, that image. So this, you can see that image. So if you are changing the version, you should ideally be using something like latest. That then you don't need to really think about changing these versions. It always be latest, and whatever the latest is, it will pick up that latest one. If you want to really specify anything, so you should be doing it through the um, version tag. This, I want to thank everyone for patiently watching, and hope I was able to cover some of the things I promised to cover. That's all those components. And then I could show you very quick demo on working demo. All of them will be available to you, including the slide and the code base and the scripts I've used. So leverage that. Enjoy your day. Thank you very much again.